The vast emptiness of space was quiet, but the silence was misleading. The human fleet moved carefully, their ships small compared to the massive alien warships ahead. The Zeveran, a powerful and warlike alien race, had arrived in full force. Their ships were sleek, dark, and armed with weapons that humanity had never seen before. The human fleet had prepared for war, but they did not know what awaited them. Commander Ethan Clark stood on the bridge of the U.S. Valiant, his face calm, but his mind racing. His crew worked quickly, their hands moving over screens and controls. The ship's sensors picked up every detail of the alien fleet, but none of it brought good news. The Zeveran were stronger, faster, and more advanced in every way. Their ships were covered in energy shields that could absorb any human attack. Their weapons could cut through human armor like paper. The battle had not even begun, yet it already felt like defeat. A voice crackled through the communication system. "They are charging their weapons, sir," a young officer called out. Clark gritted his teeth. "Hold formation," he ordered. He knew they could not win in a fair fight, but they had no choice but to try. The United Earth Defense Fleet was humanity's best, but against the Zeveran, they were nothing more than an annoyance. The first strike came fast. Bright beams of energy shot from the Zeveran ships, cutting through space and smashing into the human fleet. Explosions lit up the darkness as several human ships were destroyed instantly. The crew of the U.S. Valiant felt the shockwave as a nearby vessel was torn apart. The bridge shook and alarms blared. "Shields are failing," someone shouted. Clark gripped the console in front of him, forcing himself to stay steady. "Return fire," Clark commanded. The U.S. Valiant's cannons roared, sending missiles and plasma blasts toward the enemy. Other human ships followed, firing everything they had. But the Zeveran shields absorbed most of the attacks. Only a few enemy ships took damage, and it was not enough to slow them down. The battle turned into chaos. Human ships tried to dodge the relentless firepower, but the Zeveran were too fast, too precise. One by one, the human fleet was being destroyed. Clark watched in horror as another ship exploded in a ball of fire. His heart pounded, but he could not show fear. His crew needed him to stay strong. "Sir, we have to retreat. We can't win this fight," Olivia Grant, his second in command, said urgently. Clark hesitated. Retreat meant defeat, but staying meant certain death. He clenched his fists, then made the hardest decision of his life. "All ships, fall back. Get to the nearest jump point and escape," he ordered. The remaining human ships turned, their engines burning as they tried to escape. But the Zeveran did not let them go easily. More beams of energy shot out, cutting down ships as they fled. The U.S. Valiant weaved through the wreckage, dodging enemy fire as best as it could. Clark watched his crew work desperately, their faces tense with fear and determination. "Jump drive charging." 10 seconds. Nathan Ross, the ship's chief engineer, called out. Clark gripped the armrest of his chair. "Hold on," he shouted. The ship shook violently as another blast struck nearby. The metal groaned, sparks flew, and alarms screamed, but the ship held together. 5 seconds. Ross shouted. The Zeveran fired again. A bright light filled the bridge as an explosion erupted behind them. Clark felt his stomach drop. Had they been hit? "Jump now," he roared. The U.S. Valiant's engines flared, and in an instant, the ship was gone, vanishing into the safety of faster-than-light travel. The battle was lost, but some had survived. Clark closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The war had just begun, and humanity was not ready. But they would have to find a way to fight back. They had no other choice. The U.S. Valiant drifted through space, its hull damaged but still holding together. The crew worked quickly to repair the ship, their faces showing exhaustion and determination. They had survived the battle. But the truth was clear. Humanity could not win against the Zeveran in a fair fight. The enemy was too strong, their weapons too advanced. Something had to change. Commander Ethan Clark stood on the bridge, staring at the holographic map of the star system. He knew retreating had been the only choice, but it still felt like failure. His second-in-command, Olivia Grant, stepped beside him. "We need a new plan," she said quietly. "If we fight them the way they expect, we'll keep losing." Nathan Ross, the ship's chief engineer, rushed onto the bridge. His uniform was stained with grease, and he looked tired, but there was excitement in his eyes. "I've been thinking," he said. "The Zeverin expect us to fight like them. Big ships, big guns, direct attacks. But what if we don't? What if we use something they don't expect?" Clark turned to him. "What do you mean?" Ross grinned. "Traps. Tricks. We don't have their firepower, but we have our minds. We take what we know and turn it against them. We make them afraid of us." The idea caught hold. The crew gathered in the command center, tossing around ideas. They couldn't match the Zeverin's strength, but they could use speed, deception, and unpredictability. The Zeverin were powerful, but they followed patterns. They relied on their superior technology, never expecting an enemy to fight differently. That was their weakness. "We don't need bigger guns," Clark said. "We need to be smarter. We take old ships, raid them with explosives, and send them in as decoys. We use asteroid fields as cover. We hack their systems, turn their own tech against them. We make them fight a war they don't understand." The crew got to work. They scavenged parts from damaged ships, repurposing anything useful. Engineers built hidden missile launchers inside cargo ships, making them appear harmless until it was too late. Mechanics modified drones to interfere with enemy sensors. The ship's programmers worked on viruses that could infiltrate Zeverin systems, shutting down their weapons at crucial moments. Days passed in a blur of work. The crew was tired but motivated. They knew they were humanity's last hope. Clark walked through the ship, watching his people turn scraps into weapons. He felt a sense of pride. They were outmatched, but they were not out of the fight. Their first test came sooner than expected. A small Zeverin scout fleet appeared on the edge of the system, searching for survivors. Clark saw the opportunity. "Let's see if our tricks work," he said. The U.S. Valiant powered down, pretending to be another dead ship drifting in space. The Zeverin approached cautiously, scanning for threats. That was when the trap was sprung. The hidden missile launchers fired, striking the lead enemy ship. Explosions rocked the Zeverin fleet as the rigged cargo ships detonated, taking out 2 more enemy vessels. The remaining Zeverin ships tried to fight back, but their targeting systems failed. The virus had worked. Their sensors were blinded, their communications scrambled. Human fighters, moving unpredictably, attacked from all angles. The Zeverin had never fought an enemy like this. Within minutes, the once powerful fleet was in full retreat. The bridge of the U.S. Valiant erupted in cheers. Clark allowed himself a small smile. "It worked," he said. "They can be beaten." But the war was far from over. The Zeverin would come back, stronger than before. Humanity had won this battle, but they had only just begun to fight. Clark knew they had to keep adapting, keep finding new ways to outthink their enemy. It was the only way to survive. "We hit them where it hurts," he told his crew. "We make them afraid of us. We show them that humans don't give up." The crew nodded, determination burning in their eyes. They had found their weapon, ingenuity. And with it, they would change the course of the war. The crew of the U.S. Valiant worked quickly, knowing that the Zeverin would not stay away for long. They had won the last battle with their tricks, but the enemy would not fall for the same traps twice. Commander Ethan Clark stood in the command center, looking at the latest reports. His people were tired, but they were ready to fight again. They had to be. Olivia Grant stepped beside him. "We hurt them, but they will come back stronger," she said. "We need something new." Clark nodded. "We need to keep surprising them. We make them believe we are everywhere. We make them scared." Nathan Ross, the chief engineer, joined them. He held a small device in his hand. "We have been working on something," he said. "If we can hack into their ships again, we can make them think they are under attack when they are not. We send false signals, create ghost ships on their scanners, make them chase shadows." Clark smiled. "Good. We use that. And we set more traps. The Zeveran think we fight like them, but we won't. We fight our way." The crew got to work. They spread small beacons in space, each one sending out signals that looked like human ships. They used asteroid fields to hide real attack ships, waiting to ambush the enemy. They planted explosives on abandoned space stations, ready to blow when the Zeveran got close. Everything was set. Days later, the Zeveran fleet arrived. The enemy ships moved carefully, scanning the area. The false signals worked. The Zeveran fired at empty space, chasing ships that did not exist. The real human ships waited, hidden in the debris. Then, at the right moment, Clark gave the order. Now. Explosions tore through the Zeveran fleet. Asteroids came to life as hidden ships opened fire. The Zeveran tried to fight back, but they were confused. They could not tell what was real and what was not. Some of their ships turned to flee, only to crash into mines waiting for them. The humans fought hard. They did not have the firepower of the Zeveran, but they had speed and surprise. Every attack was unexpected, every move unpredictable. The enemy ships fell one by one. The mighty Zeveran, who once seemed unbeatable, were in disarray. A Zeveran battleship tried to escape, but the U.S. Valiant chased it. "Target their engines," Clark ordered. The ship fired, hitting the Zeveran vessel with precision. The enemy ship spun out of control. "They are sending a distress signal," Olivia said. Clark thought for a moment. Let them. Let the others hear their fear. The Zeveran fleet was broken. Some ships tried to fight, but most retreated. The humans had won again. Cheers erupted across the U.S. Valiant. They had done the impossible twice. Nathan sat down, exhausted but smiling. "They will never understand how we fight." Clark nodded. "And that is why we will win." But he knew the war was far from over. The Zeveran would come back, and when they did, the humans would be ready again. The victory had given humanity hope, but Commander Ethan Clark knew the war was far from over. The Zeveran had suffered losses, but they would not give up so easily. They would study the last battle and find ways to counter human tactics. Clark needed a new plan, something even more unpredictable. Olivia Grant and Nathan Ross stood beside him in the command center. "They will change their strategy," Olivia said. "We have to stay ahead." Nathan nodded. "What if we make them doubt their own technology? We have already tricked their scanners. What if we go further?" Clark listened carefully. "What do you suggest?" Nathan took a deep breath. "We plant false data in their systems. We make them think their own ships are compromised. If they cannot trust their sensors, they will hesitate, and hesitation will cost them." The crew worked quickly. Hackers and engineers created special programs that could infiltrate Zeveran ships. These programs would send false alerts, warnings of sabotage, fake enemy positions, system failures that did not exist. It was a mind game, one that could turn the tide of war. Meanwhile, the U.S. Valiant and other human ships prepared for the next battle. They moved carefully through space, avoiding detection. They needed to strike before the Zeveran could adjust. Days later, the Zeveran fleet returned, larger and more organized than before. But something was different. Their formations were uneven, their movements slower. The human tricks had started working. The Zeveran captains hesitated, unsure if their own ships could be trusted. "They are confused," Olivia reported. "Some of their ships are not responding to commands." Clark watched the enemy fleet on the screen. "Then we strike now." The human fleet moved fast, launching attacks before the Zeveran could react. Missiles and energy blasts tore through enemy lines. Some Zeveran ships fired blindly, hitting their own forces. Others retreated, unsure if they were really under attack or if it was another trick. The battle was chaos. The Zeverin, once disciplined and ruthless, were now uncertain. The humans took full advantage. Strike teams boarded enemy ships, disabling their weapons. Pilots used unpredictable flight patterns, making it impossible for the enemy to lock onto them. A massive Zeverin warship tried to rally the fleet, but the U.S. Valiant targeted its command center. A well-placed missile strike sent the ship into flames. The remaining Zeverin forces panicked and began to retreat. Cheers filled the human ships. Another victory, another sign that they could win this war. Clark stood on the bridge, watching as the enemy fled. "They are learning to fear us," he said. Olivia nodded. "And fear makes them weak." Nathan wiped sweat from his forehead. "We have changed the game. They don't know how to fight us anymore." Clark knew the Zeverin would not give up, but for the first time, he believed humanity had a real chance. They had turned the war into something the enemy did not understand. And as long as they stayed one step ahead, they could keep winning. The battle had ended, but the war was far from over. The crew of the U.S. Valiant worked to repair their ship while scanning for any signs of the enemy. The Zeverin had retreated, but everyone knew they would return, stronger and angrier. Commander Ethan Clark sat at the command center, studying the reports. The recent victories had given humanity a chance, but it was not enough. The Zeverin still outnumbered and outgunned them. Clark needed a new plan, something they would never expect. Olivia Grant and Nathan Ross joined him. "We have bought time, but not much," Olivia said. "They will be looking for weaknesses." Nathan nodded. "We have been using tricks, but we need something bigger, something that will force them to change how they fight." Clark thought for a moment. "We need to take the fight to them. We cannot just wait for them to attack us again. We need to strike first." The crew started working on a bold new strategy. Instead of defending, they would go deep into Zeverin territory and cause as much damage as possible. They would target supply lines, communication hubs, and command centers. If the Zeverin could not organize, they could not fight effectively. Teams prepared for infiltration missions. Engineers modified small ships to look like debris, allowing them to sneak past enemy defenses. Hackers worked on new viruses to shut down enemy systems. Every person on the U.S. Valiant had a role to play. Days later, the mission began. The human fleet split into small groups, each heading toward a different target. Clark led one of the strike teams. His group approached a massive Zeverin fuel station, disguised as wreckage. "Hold steady," he ordered as they drifted closer. The enemy did not detect them. At the right moment, the hidden ships activated and fired. Explosions ripped through the station, sending fire and debris into space. The Zeverin scrambled to respond, but the humans had already vanished into the darkness. Similar attacks happened across Zeverin space. Supply convoys were ambushed, communication stations were hacked, and key outposts were destroyed. The Zeverin tried to fight back, but they were confused and unprepared. They had never faced an enemy that fought like this. Back on the U.S. Valiant, Olivia watched the reports. "It's working. They are losing control." Nathan grinned. They'd wanted a war. Now they have one on our terms. Clark knew they had won another battle, but the war was not over. The Zeverin would not stand by and let this continue. They would adapt, just as humans had. Clark and his crew had to stay ahead, always thinking, always surprising the enemy. As he looked out into space, he knew one thing for sure. Humanity was not just surviving anymore. They were fighting back. The Zeverin were angry. The humans had struck deep into their territory, destroying supply lines and communication hubs. The once powerful alien empire was now struggling to maintain control. Their forces were spread thin, trying to stop the human attacks. But the humans did not fight like the Zeverin. They did not follow rules. They attacked and disappeared, always staying one step ahead. On board the U.S. Valiant, Commander Ethan Clark stood with his officers, looking at the latest reports. Olivia Grant pointed to a large Zeveran base on the star map. This is their main command center in this sector. If we destroy it, their forces here will be completely disorganized. Nathan Ross nodded. It's heavily guarded, but we don't need to fight head-on. We can shut them down from the inside. If we can get a team into their base, we can plant a virus in their systems. It will disable their defenses and give us a chance to strike. Clark thought for a moment. It's risky, but it's our best chance. We need volunteers. A team was formed. Clark, Olivia, and a group of skilled operatives prepared for the mission. They took a small stealth ship, hidden from enemy sensors. As they approached the Zeveran base, they moved carefully, using asteroids for cover. "We're in range," Olivia whispered. "They haven't seen us yet." The team suited up and exited the ship, using small thrusters to glide toward the enemy station. They landed on the outer hull and quickly found an access hatch. Nathan hacked into the system, opening the door. Inside, the base was massive, filled with Zeveran soldiers and engineers. The team moved carefully, avoiding patrols. Nathan worked fast, connecting a small device to the base's main system. "Almost there," he said. "Just a few more seconds." An alarm suddenly blared through the station. The Zeveran had detected them. Soldiers rushed toward their location. Clark and Olivia took cover, firing their weapons to hold them back. "Nathan, we don't have much time," Clark shouted. "Done. The virus is in," Nathan said. The station's lights flickered, and warning signals filled the air. The virus spread through the system, shutting down defenses and disrupting communications. "Let's move," Clark ordered. The team rushed back to their ship as explosions shook the base. The virus had triggered overloads in the power systems. By the time they reached their ship, the station was in chaos. As they flew away, they saw the human fleet moving in. Without defenses, the Zeveran base was an easy target. Missiles and laser fire struck the station, tearing it apart. Back on the U.S. Valiant, the crew celebrated another victory. Clark stood on the bridge, watching the remains of the enemy base drift through space. He knew the war was not over, but humanity was winning. They had proven that they were not weak. They were smart, determined, and ready for anything. The destruction of the Zeveran Command Center was a turning point. The enemy was in disarray, their forces scattered and confused. But Commander Ethan Clark knew this was not the end. The Zeveran were wounded, but they were not defeated. They would regroup, and they would strike back. On board the U.S. Valiant, the crew prepared for what was coming. Engineers worked to repair the ship, while intelligence officers studied intercepted Zeveran transmissions. Olivia Grant and Nathan Ross were in the command center, reviewing their next move. "The Zeveran have lost control of this sector," Olivia said. "But they are gathering their remaining forces. They will try to take it back." Nathan frowned. "We can't just wait for them to attack. We need to end this war." Clark listened carefully. "Then we make sure they can never threaten us again. We hit them at their core. We go after their homeworld." A silence fell over the room. The Zeveran homeworld was deep in their territory, heavily defended. It was a bold plan, but if they succeeded, the war would be over. Olivia nodded. "If we strike their leadership, they will have no choice but to surrender." Nathan looked at the map. "We can't do this alone. We need every ship, every soldier." Messages were sent to the remaining human fleets. Captains and commanders agreed. This was their chance. Within days, a massive human fleet gathered. It was the largest force humanity had ever assembled. As they approached the Zeveran homeworld, the enemy was waiting. Their defenses were strong, their fleet ready for battle. But the humans had one advantage: their ingenuity. The attack began. Human ships moved in unpredictable ways, dodging enemy fire. Fighters weaved between the massive Zeveran warships, targeting weak spots. Clark led the charge, pushing forward through the enemy lines. On the ground, strike teams landed near the enemy's command center. Olivia and Nathan led one of the teams, fighting their way through Zeveran forces. Explosions shook the city as humans advanced. Inside the command center, the Zeveran leaders watched in horror. Their empire, once powerful, was crumbling. They had underestimated humanity. Clark's voice came through the comms. "Surrender now, or we will destroy everything." The Zeveran had no choice. Their defenses were failing, their ships falling one by one. The order was given: stand down. The war was over. Back on the U.S. Valiant, cheers filled the air. Humanity had won. Clark looked out at the stars, knowing this was only the beginning. They had survived. They had fought, and they had proved that human ingenuity was the greatest weapon of all.